Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makood with you at PTV World with, of course, Farooq Batafi and Raja Faisal. We're going to be taking a look at, of course, the developing situation within Pakistan, particularly after the caretaker setup and the cabinet has been finalized. It's important, of course, now to look at the different ministries, particularly the kind of economic challenges that exist. And, of course, something that we talked about at length before the setup was sworn in. And it's important now to take a look at how particularly the finance ministry and the finance minister is going to take this forward. Ms. Shamshad Akhtar is somebody who has brought in a plan previously as well that was unfortunately not followed by the previous regime, but she of course has a huge amount of experience in terms of particularly also dealing with the IMF and then of course addressing certain economic challenges within the country. And she has also talked about leaving a proper roadmap ahead, something that is part of the continuation policy of the Prime Minister as well, and how he wants to take forward his caretaker setup. So it'd be interesting to see that and how exactly that sort of aspect is going to be dealt with, particularly given the fact that there is a review due in November. And then, of course, it seems because of the delay in elections and the new census results and delimitations being brought in, that the caretaker setup will be there longer than 3 months, which means that they might also see through the completion of the standby arrangement and then further process, of course, perhaps the next IMF bailout package. So we're going to be taking a look at all of these concerns and try and address what exactly is the plan forward and what areas need to be addressed in order to ensure that this is in fact successful. Our next segment is going to take a look, unfortunately, at the incidents of violence in Jaranwallah in Faisalabad that targeted the Christian community, something that has been condemned by the interim Prime Minister and, of course, the top leadership of the country, both civil and military. And it's important also to understand in the sentiment and in the words of the Prime Minister that there is no margin for any such actions and there is zero tolerance for anybody who takes part in such actions against the minorities. He stressed upon the responsibilities of the majority to protect the minority and also said that they are not part of us, even if they are one of us in terms of them belonging to the country. They are not part of its identity. And he said that the rights that have been guaranteed by the states is something that has to be taken a look at in terms of who's a responsible citizen as well. And they're not just there for anybody. And so it's important then to also take a look at what sort of aspect is going to be taken in with regards to investigation of these culprits. And then, of course, more importantly, in order to prevent such attacks, since we've seen a number of such attacks based on secularism or religious targets that has impacted the way that this country identifies itself and how exactly do we enable the protection of our minorities and different communities living in Pakistan. And so it's important then to also take a look at the kind of policy measures, the kind of legal measures that are in place and needed to be put in place for this to not happen again. So we're going to be taking a look at all of that at the end of the show today. For this and more, as of course introduced earlier, Farooq Batafi and Raja Faisal will be part of the discussion. We've also been joined by Dr. Agnes Afzal, who's a senior economist. He's joined us online for our first segment on the economic challenges that are there for the caretaker setup to deal with. Thank you very much, Dr. Agnes, for being part of the discussion. And let me start with you. First of all, with the appointment of the interim finance minister, which is, of course, something that is extremely important, something that was discussed at length, even as a prerequisite or perhaps as a sort of variable that was factored in the choice of the caretaker Prime Minister also in a number of discussions. And so, of course, this ministry has a lot of importance given the IMF standby arrangement as well. But first, your thoughts on this particular appointment.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. It's always a pleasure to come and speak here on PTV World. I think as to answer your question about the significance of the choice of the finance minister, I think the choice is a very good one, to get a professional economist like Dr. Shamshad Akhtar, who has a lot of experience under her belt, having worked at a number of different international financial institutions, as well as serving as the governor of the state bank. So I think all in all, it's a positive move. And I think fortunately or unfortunately, the work seems to be cut out for the finance minister, because the coming months are going to be a very challenging time for Pakistan's economy.
Right, absolutely. There's also, of course, a lot of discussion that is happening around the kind of plan that was put forward by her when she was the interim finance minister previously as well, that unfortunately was ignored by the previous regime. Do you think that if that plan had been followed, we would not have been in the situation we are today?
I think it's very difficult to say. I think uh, to answer that question, we would need, an experiment which is known as a counterfactual, and it's very difficult to actually see that if we had followed what she had proposed, we would not have run into some other difficulty. So I think as an analyst, as an economist, wouldn't like to dwell on the past. I would like to look at what may be up ahead on the road, so that Pakistani policymakers can do their homework in terms of devising the plans and the strategies, so that they can then ably and in a very professional manner deal with those challenges as they come Pakistan's way.
Yeah, Dr. Akhtas, looking at the economies back in 2018 and now, if we talk about, when the previous government left in 2018, what was the situation of overall situation of Pakistan's economy at that time? Was it harder at that time to fix the economy, or what about this assembly? When this assembly obviously completed its tenure, after that, of course, we are seeing many hurdles. So, looking at the situation, currently, it's of course we know that it is in worst shape. But how would you draw the comparison between both of them?
Well, I think the comparison is very easy. I think when the previous administration, they basically the tenure ended, I think Pakistan clocked the highest ever current account deficit, and I think that created a set of events that then basically created some of the problems that the previous administration, the one that came before the Shehbaz Sharif administration, faced. So I think those were some very, very trying times. Um, so I think so there is a very easy comparison. I think the way this administration has ended, they seem to have ended on a positive note, especially in terms of signing on the dotted line with the IMF, which I think was crucial. And I think that really was the stitch in time that was really required to make sure that Pakistan was not going to face some very, very challenging situation in the coming months. So I think it's an easy comparison overall.
All right. Farooq, when we take a look at the situation, and I'd like your comments also on the appointment, but also when we talk about the way that now it seems that the entire caretaker setup under the Prime Minister's leadership is talking about continuation of policies and continuation of the setup, and a lot of that was also echoed in what in the briefing in the Finance Ministry today as well. And so I want to understand exactly what sort of value will be added by the interim caretaker setup in terms of moving ahead. Will they just make sure that the commitments previously done are followed and executed, or will there be certain policy changes that can also be expected?
Right, Sana, thank you very much for the question regarding Dr. Shamshad Akhtar. I think you will not find anybody who has covered economy who doesn't praise her. I mean, I'm in awe of her, and she has been a thorough professional as the Governor State Bank, and then you pointed out as the interim finance minister the last time. That actually takes us back to your question as well, because at that time she became, or her policies became, not only victim of inadequacy of the government that followed her, but also her own prime minister, because we ended up selecting a retired chief justice as the prime minister at that time. Most of our judges are usually literalist. So the first thing they did was they took a pledge that they are not going to actually engage in any policy that may go beyond their own remit, right? That was the time when the previous government had actually seen change in finance minister. After Ishaq Dar, we saw Miftah Saab, and because both have very, divergent approaches to economy. Our economy was in bad shape and it was in need of repair or an IMF program. At that time, she could have, and we were told that she had negotiated an excellent deal with IMF at that time. But because she couldn't sign it herself, and then we saw that the next government that came, especially their first finance minister, kept on dilly-dallying and refusing to go to IMF. Because of that, for 9 months or 10 months, I believe, we kept on bleeding forex, foreign exchange, and we could not have the kind of stabilizing policy that was needed. By that time, we went to IMF. At that time, our situation was so precarious, we could not actually get the kind of deal that perhaps we would have had she been the finance minister at that time. So with that kind of situation, I think this time we should be grateful, as was pointed out by Dr. Saab as well, that the former Prime Minister, the outgoing Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, before he left, he actually signed this SBA with IMF, and that has proven that we can actually keep on moving forward. Now, what kind of changes we might expect? The first thing, of course, most of the policies we have already written down and committed to the IMF. We have to focus on macroeconomic stabilization. We have to ensure that our currency is not regulated. We have to ensure that our economy stops bleeding money and the government actually improves inflows. Apart from that, if there is a possibility of any kind of FDI, especially thanks to the SIFC, then and especially this time we have seen a minister, an advisor being given the charge of SIFC as well. So with that kind of situation, I think that if anything comes further in the future, we should be celebrating. But right now, what she is going to do is, I think, follow the commitments that we had made with our international partners.
All right, Dr. Agus, the situation, it seems, in terms of what we've been hearing from the ACP, is that the caretaker setup is going to be in place longer than the 90-day time period, which means that perhaps the caretaker setup is also going to see through the completion of the standby arrangement. And I want to know whether or not that helps the situation, given the fact that this was something that the IMF was already aware of, that they'd have to go through 3 different governments. But I want to know whether the situation in terms of dealing with the same people till the completion of the program benefits us.
Well, I think before I answer that question, I would just like to speak a bit about what Farooq Saab was talking about. I think this current administration, the caretaker administration, you are right. I mean, I think it appears at the moment that they are going to be at the helm for longer than 90 days. And it's very, very likely, there is actually a very high probability that this finance team is going to negotiate another extended fund facility with the IMF, because I think that is going to be the situation at the end of the completion of this standby arrangement. So I think there's a very high probability of that. Having said that, I think this administration, or this caretaker administration, faces three different types of challenges coming from 3 different directions. And let me give me a few moments to explain what I'm trying to say. Number one, I think the first set of challenges are going to be internal or domestic. And I think when I say that, I'm basically referring to this government or this interim administration trying to stay on the course of macroeconomic stabilization, which is so very important right now. And when I say that, I'm basically talking about keeping the current account deficit in check, our fiscal deficit in check, and maybe also work in an environment which has very high interest rates. So I think that is going to be a very, very big challenge for this administration. They are also going to have to stay the course on various reforms that have been promised with the IMF. So here I'm speaking about resource mobilization reforms. And this is why you saw the new finance minister visit with the FPR today, because it is so very important to keep increasing our resource envelope. I think the second set of challenges are going to come from the external side. And here I'm particularly referring to any kind of geopolitical disturbances that would then create very, very high prices for oil as well as for commodities. So we could probably be looking at another commodity super cycle. And how is this administration going to deal with that is going to determine what happens in Pakistan. And there are also now fears that China might be entering a recession. Now, this could be completely premature, but certainly some analysts are saying that China is entering a recessionary period and how that is going to impact the global economy. And finally, if you would allow me very, very quickly, I think the third set of challenges are going to be socio-political. And here I'm specifically referring to this massive increase in the price of oil and what kind of inflationary situation that is going to create in Pakistan and how that might actually fuel social unrest in Pakistan, especially when elections seem to be, far away, further down the road than just 90 days. So I think these three different set of situations are going to really test the acumen of the finance team. So I really hope that they have done their SWOT analysis and that they have made their own set of solutions to the problems that they are going to be now facing.
Yeah, Dr. Saab, regarding just a point of clarification, you spoke about the possibility that China might also be entering into a recessionary phase. Are you basing that assessment on what happened with Evergrande, that they have actually filed for bankruptcy, or you're talking about something else as well here?
No, I'm not. I'm basically referring to some of the analysis that I am reading and some of the things that the major global economy watchers are now saying, because there was a lot of stress on Chinese currency recently. And the reason why that is happening is that there seems to be this idea that China's economic performance post COVID-19 has not been what people were expecting it to be. So I think there is some idea that China might be facing some recessionary type of situation.
Yeah, Dr. Akhtas, earlier you highlighted the external factors that can obviously stress our economy. Can we say that there will be external factors that can be benefit for our economy as well? Especially looking at, we know that there is a Vision 2030 of Saudi Arabia, and we know we are known for sending our professionals and labor class and everyone to Saudi Arabia. It's a destination for Pakistani remittances as well. Can we say that in coming future we might see increase in that, and that can give a boost to our economy?
And Dr. Akhtas, add to that the challenges that you've just pointed out. They're really deep rooted and of course have a lot of moving parts as well. And I want to know whether or not the responsibility of being able to address these challenges within a limited time period is something that is possible, or do you think that at least a direction can come out of the caretaker setup that we can then continue forward?
Okay, so let me first try to answer Faisal Saab's question. I think I completely agree with you, Faisal, because I think whenever we talk about the threats or challenges emerging for Pakistan or any other country like Pakistan in the global system of states, we sometimes forget to assume that countries have friends and that they are not helpless. And this is exactly what happened in the case of when people were trying to come up with these doomsday scenarios that Pakistani economy was somehow going to default. And, history proved the fact that Pakistan is not helpless and that Pakistan has some good negotiators and policymakers. So similarly, I think having challenges is not the problem. How we deal with those challenges is going to determine how we, deal with the challenges coming from the external environment. And so let me turn to the question that Sana posed. Okay, so the work that the interim administration has to do is going to be very, very important, because I think these challenges or these threats that emanate, especially domestically or externally, are not going to basically differentiate between who is actually at the helm. So I think the business of the state has to continue. Pakistan's government has to have a strategic viewpoint towards the future, and they must keep working on finding solutions to all these different challenges that may or may not emerge in the months to come.
Right, and Farooq, there is of course also when we talk about the kind of aspects that have been discussed, again how the people are also viewing the situation and whether or not they're going to be seeing any sort of change in the kind of economic challenges that they face daily. And I understand also that in the briefing it was spoken about how there are going to be efforts towards curbing inflation and moving forward in a positive direction. But do you think that that is something that we'll be able to see given also the conditions with the IMF and then of course the kind of tough measures that still need to be taken?
Right. Earlier, just now, Dr. Saab actually referred to the high interest of policy rate, right? And what is the key reason why we have been asked by the fund to keep it as high as 21% or 22% for that matter? It is essentially to curb inflation, right? But what it does, Sana, is also slow down the economy. When you're going to get that kind of interest, why are you going to invest on savings, by the way? Why are you going to invest money in the market, right? So with that, the economy usually contracts, and that creates a lot of problem. But my biggest concern is that with apologies to Dr. Saab, because he is a renowned economist, but I'm going to actually lash out at the neoliberal economic model, because the way things are going, I don't think that most economists internationally have any idea what they're talking about. On one side, the biggest problem is that usually these interest rates actually are instrumental in curbing the hyperinflationary pressures and controlling prices, right? It doesn't seem to be working in this country. So on one side, there's a possibility that the system might be broken. On the other side, there's also a possibility that things might actually not be. These levers are not working. On the other side, there's another concern regarding, shrinking economy. With recently this price hike when it comes to electricity, we have seen, and petroleum prices, we have seen that many factories have announced that they are going to actually just shut down. So what happens with the people who were earning a living there? Now, let me also very quickly talk about China and international economic situation, because I've also seen these reports regarding China's possible slowdown. But there's something amazing going on, Sana. On one side, I mean, it takes a lot for someone to actually, in the same breath, talk about high inflationary pressures and possibility of a slowdown. Recession and inflation are practically opposite to each other. So from an accelerating economy where everything is heating up, all of a sudden things start shrinking or slowing down to the extent that we go into a recession is something that seems to be a big ask. Okay. The biggest problem right now is that when you look at the commentary, international commentary regarding China, and I totally grant you that Evergrande, one very huge property tycoon or company in China, has sued for bankruptcy, and this is something that it has been saying for, threatening to do for quite some time. But does that mean that China's consumption is going to slow down? If it is not, do you think that China's economy is literally going to go under the radar, or it is going to slip southward? I don't think so. Internationally, yes, there are places or pockets where slowdown has happened. Okay. And I can talk about UK, and UK is a country that is afflicted because of Brexit. But elsewhere in Europe, if you look at France, Germany, the economy is booming right now, right? With that kind of situation, I don't think currently we should be expecting the global slowdown. I think it will take ages.
All right. Dr. Agdas and Faisal, you can add to that because Dr. Agdas has to leave soon as well. You can add to that, Dr. Agdas, but also I want to talk a little bit about the SIFC because right before the caretaker setup getting in and the previous tenure leaving in, this was, of course, marked as a milestone achievement, as something that is going to bring a lot of FDI in the country and will act as a channel of bringing in more money. And so this is going to be an important platform for us moving forward as well. And there was also a lot of continuity that was stressed upon in the entire structure of the SIFC as well. But I want to know whether or not you think that the platform will be able to attract as much FDI as is being projected or hoped for.
And Dr. Akdas, if you can allow me, it's related to FDIs. We know that in past, of course, the FDIs we were attracting, that was for the real estate of Pakistan. And we know it has shrinked. The biggest reason is that obviously people who are living in Europe, they were sending in FDIs in the real estate. And it is all due to one factor, and that is Ukraine war. And because it has increased the energy prices over there, now if Saudi Arabia is successful in bringing Russia and Ukraine on the table and resolve the situation out there, would it be a positive factor that can actually rechannelize the FDIs for our real estate, sir?
Okay, let me first try to answer just talk about the comment that Farooq Saab made. Look, I'm not hoping that China enters a recession. I am just quoting from what I have been reading about China. And if China does enter into a recessionary phase, that is going to impact Pakistan in a very big way, because if China enters into a recession, then what this means is that some of the other biggest economies of the world are going to enter into a recession. And that means that Pakistan's export destinations are then going to be in a situation where it is going to impact our exports. So I think we should probably develop some kind of a scenario, a war gaming scenario, in which we are dealing with a situation where there is a general global economic slowdown, because this is a very crucial time when we are already in an IMF program. Then let me turn to Sana and try to answer her question about this facilitation council that you talked about. I think it's a very decent and a very interesting initiative, because I would like to take you back to what happened during COVID-19, when civilian and military institutions came together because the situation was such, and then they tried to address COVID-19 to the best of their ability. Now, Pakistan is again facing a situation in which business as usual ways of dealing with the economy have not worked. So I think this is one of the, advantages of the Pakistani political system, that Pakistani civilian and military institutions are extremely dynamic and versatile. And whenever the situation demands, they have the ability to come together and work for a single goal. So I welcome the formation of this investment council, and I hope that they will bring in the very needed investment in Pakistan. And then if I can turn to Faisal Saab's question, which was about, Ukraine. And I completely forgot what your question was about. Sorry. You can ask me that question again.
Sir, Ukraine war and Saudi Arabia's efforts.
Absolutely. I think I have been reading about the amazing diplomatic efforts that the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has been making, especially in terms of Russia and Ukraine. I'm hoping for a peaceful settlement between these two countries. And if that happens, that is going to be a major boon for almost all the economies in this region, including Pakistan.
Excellent.
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Akdas Afzal, for joining us and being a part of the discussion. We're going to be now talking about the way forward, also with reference to, of course, how the caretaker setup is going to take numerous challenges, including economic ones, and of course others that lie ahead. Farooq, anything you'd like to add before we move on to the next one?
Yeah, very quickly, I just wanted to clarify. I'm not accusing anyone that they would wish China to actually slow down.
Sure.
What I was actually referring to is that there's, right now, people keep on talking about the upcoming Cold War, right? And because of that, I think that the Western media and pundits have already slipped into that kind of mode. So every day you keep on seeing commentary coming from the Western pundits that China's economy is getting destroyed. It is not true. It is the second most populous country in the world. With that kind of population, you cannot that easily slip into a recession. I think that their other fundamentals are pretty fine. Their pollution levels, by the way, still keep on rising, that would actually show you that the manufacturing side hasn't actually taken any kind of, hasn't stumbled yet, right? And then we are talking about high prices around the world. Usually, I understand that there is also a possibility of stagflation, but look at job creation that is going on in A, China, B, in Europe, and then C, in America. Why would any pundit say that there is going to be a recession when the global economy, thanks to COVID and shutdown and afterwards, is heating up? So right now, all we have to care about is our own people, and somehow we have to find a way working with the fund to ensure that the poor, especially people who have been who recently have slept below the line of basic subsistence, they are supported by some kind of measure like BISP or something else.
Right, absolutely, and that's of course important. And we're now going to be taking a look at another aspect of supporting the people of Pakistan, which is extremely important as well, particularly our minorities, and it was stressed upon by the caretaker Prime Minister as well, in terms of how this is something that is the responsibility of the state, and that this is not something that is in line with our identity, and whoever of course is part of such violence or such crimes is not one of us. And that's important also in terms of how we're going to deal with the scenario, and then of course the policies and legal measures that need to be in place, and the kind of investigation then that needs to be there when we talk about this particular incident. And Faisal, this is something that of course is very close to all of us, and we of course really feel the pain of everybody who is a victim of not just this incident but any other such incident within the country and elsewhere as well, where minorities are attacked, or anybody is attacked on the basis of any sort of difference. But I want to know that if we look back, there have been numerous occasions and numerous such incidents that unfortunately have unfolded in the past year alone. And I want to be able to then understand exactly where the problem lies in the way that that the resolve is there to protect the minorities' rights, but if we are unable to do so, what needs to be corrected?
Sana, first of all, obviously, the cases, they should be dealt with on the rapid basis, number one, and number two, the cases where the convictions are made, strict action should be taken against the people. We for now know that in this particular case, more than 600 people, they've been obviously captured, and geofencing is still going on, and police is doing its work, and all of the security forces, including the intelligence services of Pakistan, they are doing best of their work, and they are making it possible that all of the culprits, they are brought to justice. This is a country where minorities have always been very dear, where minorities under the constitution, they are in every field they are serving Pakistan, and especially if we talk about the Christian community, they play a pivotal role when it comes to education sector, when it comes to defense sector, when it comes to administration sector, they play a pivotal role. Only today I was talking to someone that in my particular tehsil, there was one of the assistant commissioners. She first of all, of course, she was a female, and secondly, she was a Christian female, and she was throughout a gold medalist, and the time she spent in my tehsil, it was one of the best times I saw in my tehsil, because she was an excellent administrator. So they play excellent role in every field of Pakistan.
And that's not even necessary, and it's important that it's there, but that's not a prerequisite for us to protect them.
Exactly, this shouldn't be at all. And if we look at these kind of communal violence, I think what was actually missing, it was just the time lapse which the security forces, they should have been rapid enough to control it. And it was
talking about law enforcement.
Law enforcement. I'm talking about police. The police action which was taken, it was a bit delayed one. Maybe they required some kind of preparedness or anything. But riot police, they were available. They should have been, in a rapid action should have been taken over from them. And at the same time, I think the use of speakers from the mosques, there should be strict instructions about them, and there should be check and balance. And because
You've
if
said
this
that you've said that before, Faisal, and I appreciate it. But I want to know whether or not this is something that A, there is a will for, and secondly that we're able to then also make the people that are organizing such announcements understand that this is not something they're aware of, because in a lot of such religious particularly incidents, there's a lot of backlash that unfortunately we've seen before.
Sana, if we go through the leaderships of certain parties who are in certain ways consider themselves as political parties, but of course at the same time they're religiously motivated political parties, they need to sit together. Of course, with the with the high ups and the interim setup, they need to sit with them as well and give them the clear instructions that what are the lines they can talk about and what they can't talk about at all. And secondly, if we talk about Pakistan as a state, Pakistan as a state never lets any minority down. Be it Hindus living in Sindh, be it Christians living in whole Pakistan, wherever they are, they have never been let down by Pakistan as a state and Pakistan's constitution as a safeguard for them. But of course, there are certain elements of the society. I'm talking about the religious leaderships. They need to be talked with, and they are the ones who can play a pivotal role in making people aware of these kind of situations and how they can react, and why it is important for everyone to not take law in their own hands, and everything they see they have to just report to police. That's it.
Right, I understand that, but Farooq, a lot of these are extremely sensitive issues also, unfortunately, when we take a look at being able to unfold and deconstruct especially such incidents. There are a lot of issues that exist, and there's also of course the concerns with law enforcement, with of course our policies and our laws in place, and the will and capabilities of the people executing them. But I also want to know how we are able to then also penetrate within the ideology and also are able to bring forth a change from within that then eventually in a longer term sense is able to automatically protect the minorities, to create an environment which in itself is not harmful.
Right, Sana, and that is a very important question. I think for past 20 years since we started fighting war on terror, especially in 2014 when the terrorists actually killed our children in Peshawar. Since then we have come up with many measures, especially National Action Plan. So the first question that comes to mind, there are many measures that are recommended there, right? Especially regarding de-radicalizing of the society. And one keeps on wondering why is it that many of them don't seem to be at play here at all, right? But having said that, let me remind everybody that what happened in Jaranwallah is a big blot on our conscience. Whatever kind of environment of fear was created, the kind of we are grateful that there wasn't any casualty, but the climate of fear, especially remember that in any society, and I take you back to the national security policy that came out a couple of years ago. There's a line there that a state is as strong or as weak as its weakest citizen. So who is the most vulnerable citizen in this country? A, the poor, B, the minorities. And now we are talking about a community which is A, poor, and B, minority. So do you think that it is source of any kind of pride for any of us that this happened, and the people and the kids and the families had to spend nights in farms outside of their own houses because the houses were destroyed? So these are important questions to remember. Now, regarding what you asked, what I have to say about it is that this idea of sitting with the religious organizations and working out some kind of strategy.
Yeah.
This has been happening for quite some time already. What you need to do is, and by the way, here comes the question of responsibility as well. You know, you have to draw a line in the sand and tell people, here the state of Pakistan stands, and there whosoever doesn't follow its dictates stands, right? If somebody is using violence to harass any citizen, why shouldn't they face the worst kind of punishment possible, right? Especially I remember, if you remember also the day we interviewed the former Prime Minister, that day we sat in the program and I was talking about an accident that took place, a railway accident, right? And our failure to take responsibility. If that cabinet was gone already in one day, had the minister actually resigned that day, it would have indicated that there is some kind of responsibility being taken. I don't know what has happened on ground, how many police officials there have actually volunteered to resign, I don't know, or how many have been suspended. But the question is, why is it that we keep on, you use a word that is sensitive issues.
Yeah.
I don't understand why they are sensitive.
Yeah.
I mean,
I get your point.
sensitivity is about, mood and
Right.
inability to take
Yeah.
pressure. And we are talking about people whose, rights were violated, and a state machinery that should have been there to stop that kind of violation, and somebody literally dropped the ball. So
Yeah.
why not any kind of action there as well? Take some responsibility and punish the culprits, and ensure that whosoever actually does this again will be taught a lesson.
Right. Farooq, I also want to very quickly talk about the issues with regards to accusations of blasphemy, because in a lot of times that we have seen, there have been people that have been falsely accused, but then the enraged mob attacks without taking a look at any of the circumstances or even bothering to figure out whether it's true or not. And we understand that a mob has a different psychology, but I want to know legally in terms of how we can then act towards it or prevent it perhaps in the future in terms of a threat of consequence. What sort of legal measure exists for a false accusation of blasphemy, and how is it established even? Because it seems that unfortunately a lot of the times where a different religion is involved, they are almost automatically accused of blasphemy.
Right. And Sana, you have taken the matter to the heart of the problem. If you have seen what happened in Jaranwallah, after that editorials in the papers, right? They kept on actually lashing out at the blasphemy law. I'm not a big fan of the way it was structured by General Ziaul-Haq and how it actually was used by many people to persecute, with the weakest of the weak. But frankly, since then there have been additions that have actually brought in certain safeguards, right?
Okay.
We are going to talk about if we have time. But usually when an accusation of blasphemy takes place and there's a lynching mob and mob justice, at that time these laws are not working. These people are taking law into their own hand, right? So what is the biggest, reasoning that should be there? The mob has to be, dispersed and told that there are laws, and if there is someone accused, he can actually face the legal process, and you shouldn't be meddling in it, right? Whenever that doesn't happen, it is not about blasphemy law, but your culture that actually relies excessively on lynching. This is the madness that we are talking about in South Asia, right? India has taken to a new level of perfection of madness, but we still are there. We are more or less the similar kind of people. So this has to stop as well. And remember, as long as there's law, and as long as the judges, the lawyers, and the people who are there, part of the law enforcement as well, they are not afraid for their own lives, right? And the state's machinery and its entire support is behind their back, they will do justice, and innocents will not suffer. Unfortunately, because there's mob rule mostly, and that's why it is very important not only to punish the culprits, but whosoever was not there to enforce, law there to ensure that innocents are not hounded by mobs.
There's one-liner.
Yes.
Sana, I think government should advise through the religious ministry to all of the mosques that during the Jummah prayers, sermons, they should and they must make people aware about the laws we already have in terms of dealing with these kind of situations.
All right.
I don't think that will happen on
Yeah.
ground.
Thank
Because
you.
the mosques don't function like that.
Thank you very much, Farooq, and thank you very much, Faisal. And these are important issues, and we hope that the similar discussion and self-reflection is also happening where it matters and with the decision makers, and we're actually able to put forward the resolve that we have in our hearts and in our words to action and help the people who need it the most. That's all we have from the debate. See you tomorrow.